Hello, my name is Nikki. I'm a sleep researcher at Penn State University in the Department of Biobehavioral Health. I'm going to be sharing some sleep surveillance data, in particular how it responds to or how it investigates sleep insufficiency. So sleep insufficiency is defined as an inadequate quantity or quality of sleep, and it's estimated that 50 to 70 million Americans chronically suffer from a disorder of sleep and wakefulness. This leads to a degradation of daily functioning and cognition, which influences children, teens, adults, and their ability to function at work, at school, and in their social lives. It also increases the risks of accidents and injuries, and one of the primary ways we study this is through an assessment of psychomotor vigilance, which refers to a physical response to a stimuli. So we assess this and the lapses in attention, which correspond with lapses in attention while doing dangerous tasks such as driving a vehicle. We also look at how sleep restriction or sleep deprivation can lead to adverse effects of health, including obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, stroke, and depression. And the reason we look at some of these conditions is because they are some of the largest burdens to the healthcare system because of the number of people they affect, and also because of the instances in which some of these are preventable by behavior changes. So this image is a bit more descriptive of the means in which insufficient sleep can adversely affect health and our use of healthcare resources. So we see that impaired attention and reaction time, like I mentioned, leads to greater instances of injuries, especially through motor vehicle accidents. In fact, there was a study in Australia that indicated that there are over 72,000 crashes a year, or at least there were in 2013, as a result of drowsiness, and this is likely underreported due to the fact that it's harder to investigate instances of impaired reaction time in drivers as opposed to, let's say, distracted driving from texting or impaired driving from drugs and alcohol. We also notice a decreased memory and concentration, worse mood and depression, impaired task completion, and psychosocial difficulties in individuals who are sleep deprived or sleep restricted. For example, faces, the interpretation of a neutral face or a sad face will be perceived as more threatening than it actually is. Additionally, we notice increased risk of injuries and falls and incidents of pain, which in turn then cause a lesser amount of exercise, which is one way that sleep restriction can adversely affect health and increase risk for obesity. But we also notice that the weight gain, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease occur through other mechanisms, particularly through sensitivity to the response of insulin to glucose, and also through cravings. So individuals who are sleep deprived are more likely to crave higher calorie dense foods. And in combination, all of these in totals thus increase the consumption of healthcare resources, which is why this is a public health concern. I'd now like to address sleep as a behavior. So not only is it not volitional in the sense that it is necessary to function, perform, and maintain health, it is also volitional in that we do have some control over it. Similar to other habits such as drinking, smoking, diet, and exercise, we have control over how much sleep we get. More so, we have more control over bedtime because our society has a pretty established early work and school time, but other behaviors may influence this ability to sleep, such as drinking, smoking, and caffeine, which are all known to reduce the quantity and quality of sleep achieved, while increase in physical activity and light exposure, particularly to outdoor light, can improve sleep duration and sleep quality. And then there's a strong bidirectional relationship with work, family, and stress, in that the amount of stress and work and family commitments you have in your life can greatly decrease or increase the amount of sleep you get, and in response, the productivity you have at work, the time spent with your family, and the stress you perceive yourself under can also be influenced by the amount of sleep you're getting at night. So with sleep being acknowledged as a behavior, at least in some of the field, we're starting to shift our recommendations to include sleep. So originally, we have that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services recommends eating smart, exercising regularly, getting routine health screenings, and being an active participant in managing your health. Start leading a healthy lifestyle. So these were the health behavior recommendations that have been most substantial over the past decade or so. So we've seen movements leading towards quitting smoking, limiting alcohol, cutting back on risky behaviors like drinking and driving. We also noticed changes in nutritional items, such as changing the food pyramid to a plate that's more representative of the nutrients we should be intaking. And we're also seeing campaigns such as the Play for a 60-Minute campaign that's being promoted by the NFL to target children. But the Healthy People 2020 initiative has added 2 more components that it would like individuals to get adequate sleep and also to promote treatment for sleep disorders, which are some of the risk factors for individuals who suffer from sleep insufficiency. So we have individuals with sleep disorder, like insomnia, disrupted breathing, which is mostly referred to as apnea. So sleep apneas are common in children and also in obese people. And then we also noticed trends in occupational and lifestyle affecting sleep. So there's been an increase in individuals who work night or rotating shifts, individuals working longer hours, and also individuals who travel across time zones. This leads to circadian rhythm disruptions and can also lead to sleep disorders such as a shift work disorder. We also noticed that longer hours and the addition of TV and internet into the home have been restricting individual sleep, and also working and balancing a family have restricted sleep as well. This is believed to be a recent trend in that there are more people who are attempting to work, but also that the TV and internet, in addition to consuming time, the blue light exposure also leads to sleep restriction. So some of the sleep disorders that are known to restrict sleep, or anything that restricts sleep, is sleep loss. So we have sleep disordered breathing and apneas, insomnia, which often goes hand in hand with psychiatric disorders, narcolepsy, circadian rhythm disorders, and other sleep-related psychiatric, neurological, or medical disorders. Some other syndromes that are include restless leg syndrome and night terrors. And then the lifestyle risk factor includes components from your neighborhood, your family, for instance, individuals with a newborn or a dependent child, or an elderly or sick family member will spend more of their time tending to others' needs than individuals who don't have that additional stress. We also look at how culture influences the amount of sleep individuals get. We look at the work and household struggles and demands and how those can lead to sleep deficiency, causing sleep restriction, circadian disruption, and or sleep fragmentation. So sleeping in a little bit at night, during naps, things that are broken up like that. We look at the mechanisms of proximal outcomes, such as being accident injury prone, degradation of cognition, and then we also look at the distal outcomes, such as prolonged hypertension, metabolic breakdown, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and other health risks. The Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, the BRFSS, is a tool that was used to assess sleep. It is a government-supported surveillance tool that's been used since 1984, and it's a well-established government-supported annual surveillance tool with a high standard of quality of test questions, and it's grown from approximately 100,000 telephone interviews in '93 to over 500,000 per year at this time. I chose to use this surveillance data because it is the largest continuously conducted health survey system in the world. Their collection method includes random digit dialed surveys, and it provides state-specific data. With pertain to the sleep questions in 2009, adult respondents in 12 states completed it, and it was an optional portion. It asks, in general, about preventative health measures and risk behaviors with adverse health outcomes, including things that result in chronic disease, injury, and infectious diseases. And I'm a fan of it because it's geared toward prevention. And part of what I'm interested in studying is how behavioral changes can prevent or improve health outcomes. The questions it asked about how many hours of sleep you got in a 24-hour period, not just the time you should be spending sleeping, but the actual time you were sleeping. And it asks if you snore, and how many days did you find yourself unintentionally falling asleep, and if you have nodded off or fallen asleep, even for a brief moment while driving. And this asks you to recall the past 30 days. So the variables that are being investigated here are duration, snoring, and drowsiness. The results of this were that 35.3 reported less than 7 hours of sleep, 48% reported snoring, 38% reported unintentionally falling asleep during the day, and 4.7 reported nodding off while driving. The results lent us to believe that we should be doing more research. So the individuals at the National Healthy Sleep Awareness Project use the data that's been previously collected, so previous literature and other surveillance data, to come up with sleep-related questions from prior projects, review the strengths and weaknesses of those prior questions, and adapt them and use them in the BRFSS. So the outcome were that the variables they wanted to investigate are duration, quality, satisfaction, alertness, and obstructive sleep apnea risk. So duration is one that was kept from the 2009 version to be included in the next one, and it addresses the hours of sleep. We're also looking at the quality of the sleep, so the difficulty in falling asleep and staying asleep. That's our sleep latency and ability to stay asleep. Also looks at interruptions and the time awake in bed, which would include if you're woken up during the night or if you wake up on your own, how long does it take you to fall back asleep? We're looking at satisfaction and how people report their contentness with the amount of sleep they're getting. And then slightly different from that, but similar, is the alertness. So this addresses your ability to function in the day, stay alert, especially during undesired tasks or drowsy driving tasks. And then we have the risk for sleep apnea. So this looks at issues directly related to snoring or other symptoms, including BMI. From this, they were able to develop the following questions. The first one, pertaining to duration, that was pretty much maintained, is how many hours of sleep do you get in a 24-hour period? Pertaining to satisfaction and quality, we're looking at over the past 2 weeks, how many days have you had trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or sleeping too much? And then to assess alertness, we're looking at for how many days did you find yourself unintentionally falling asleep during the day? And then to assess the risk for sleep apnea, we're looking at snoring, tiredness, observed apneas, and elevated blood pressures. Some of the greatest limitations in this study is that the initial effort, the 2009 study, lacks significant and validated prior measurement, but since then there have been additional data collections and we're able to adapt some of the more validated measures into it. However, it still remains a limitation because we cannot use the exact version. Subsequently, and hand in hand with that, we are limited by the number of questions we can ask. For example, validated measures such as the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index and the Calgary Sleep Apnea Quality of Life Questionnaire are validated measures, but they're a bit more exhaustive and are much longer. There's also a degree of uncertainty to which variables are most correlated with adverse outcomes, but this is something they were able to improve upon substantially since the 2009 questionnaire. Additionally, these questions are dependent on self-answered questions, so there's a potential for recall bias, which is why there's a shift from a 30-day to a 14-day recall time. And there's also some bias based on on social bias, which can lead to people reporting what they think the researchers want to hear. And then the data is also subjective, and there's no physical data. So other studies, such as the National Health and Nutrition Examination, include a physical examination, but it would be impossible to use polysomnography, which uses electrodes on the scalp to measure sleep, or actigraphy, which is like a Fitbit, which is a wrist-worn device to measure sleep, because of the cost and time limitations and respondents' willingness to participate. Also, none of the risk factors associated with sleep apnea are diagnostic enough to assign sleep apnea to participants who take the survey. However, there are some strengths, and these include the validated established system put in place, the gear toward prevention, and also the fact that this study is able to represent a general population without some inclusion-exclusion criteria or only using individuals who report sleep disorders at a physician's office or a hospital. So I'm very happy to share this information with you. I would like to thank the Penn State Sleep Health and Society Lab and the current members, including PIs Orfeo Buxton and Amory Chang, graduate students Mike Strayer and Kelly Ness, and fellow research assistants Chloe Beverly and Lindsay Master. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this topic, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have about sleep or even any tips you'd like to know to sleep better. And I look forward to hearing your presentations. Thank you.